Good morning. Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Maria Tranquilli, and I'm a program manager at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. For those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit dedicated to enabling entrepreneurs from all over the world to realize their maximum potentials and grow. We will open up for Q&A at the end of this event, so please submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. And none of what we do could be possible without all of the amazing support from our sponsors. We are humbled by their contributions. During these unique times, we are curious about sentiment and how you're feeling as entrepreneurs during these times. We would like to start by taking 2 different polls to let us know how you're feeling about your business right now. Poll number 1, how are you currently feeling? Are you fearful? Are you anxious? Are you surviving? Or are you feeling optimistic? Please let us know. Share these results. Amazing. A lot of people are feeling optimistic, and I would say it's a split between anxious and surviving. And our second question, what is keeping you up at night? Is it finance, sales, marketing, scaling, pivoting your team, or surviving? Please let us know. Okay, to share these results, well, marketing and sales look like they're at the top of the list for today, which is perfect for the topic that we will be covering. So without further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our guest, Christine Alemany, Chief Executive Officer of TBGA. Christine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Can you guys all see my screen? Just
yes,
want to make sure.
Screen and we
Awesome.
can see and hear you. Perfect. Thank you for joining
Awesome.
me.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about the marketing mix from seed and beyond. And before we get going, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I actually began my career in startups about 20 years ago. Luckily, my startup was acquired prior to the internet bubble bursting. And after that, I decided to go a very safe route, working for leadership teams on Fortune 100 companies like Dell and Citi and United Technologies until I got really bored and started working with startups again. And now I'm the CEO of TBGA, and we provide strategic and tactical branding and marketing support to emerging growth companies, usually Series A, Series B companies. So let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about what marketing is, very high level, how you build your mix, not only what the mix is, but how you start building your team as you scale, and then how you evolve that mix as you mature. So marketing is really just sharing a compelling story that supports your brand, engages your customers, and sets you apart from the crowd. At the core of marketing is an objective view of your company and your competition and how you stack up against them. And one of the most important things is an understanding of your customer. And the foundation of effective marketing is just that, having a deep understanding of your target. Who are they? Which is demographics, psychographics, what's important to them, what are their problems and beliefs, how do they make decisions, and who do they turn to for information? Is it friends, colleagues, social, Google? How do you reach them? Meaning, where do they play? How can you serve them the right information at the right time where they are? And lastly, how do you get them to act on those beliefs and decisions, essentially pull the trigger for a buy decision. And so, you know, whenever people talk about marketing and sales, they talk about building a relationship. And so how do you build a relationship? And how do you start that process? And, you know, the first is really defining what makes you unique in the market. Similar to dating, why would they want to work with you? Why would they want to buy with you? What is the playing field? What's the competitive context? Where are you sparring with the competition? Why would your targets want to buy from you and work for you? What are you giving them in return for their money and their time? And lastly, can you back up those claims? You know, what data, customer referrals, customer reviews can you provide to help your targets understand and believe why they should work or buy from you? So that's really high level of what you're achieving with your marketing support. And what we're going to need to do is, you know, kind of shift of, you know, what we need to do to how we're going to do it, right? We want to build relationships. We want to differentiate from the competition. We want to convince people to buy from us. So what are the components that we need to think about? I like to think about it in terms of three major components. Everybody has a different idea, but I like to think about it in terms of brand, PR, and demand generation. So brand, when people think about it, they usually ask, you know, what should my logo look like? Whenever you think about your brand, think about well beyond your logo. It's the personification of your company over time. It's the visual, the verbal, the physical expression of that personification. Whatever it is, it needs to be authentic, meaning it needs to reflect the vision, mission, values that your company has. And that's because audiences want to buy from brands that they trust. And so what's important is that whatever your brand is, you need to walk the walk over time. You can't change constantly. You can't be shifting with popular opinion. You have to really stand in your truth. The next component is PR, which is from a very high level, sharing compelling stories about your company. The goal here is to engage influencer audience, such as editors, reporters, analysts, and influencers, what now B2C folks call influencers. And you do that by tying your company story to the industry at large, to trending news, injected into speaking engagement at conferences, and injected into editorial calendars, so you're in print. And then the last piece is demand generation. This is where your left and right brain work in tandem to guide people through the buyer's journey. This includes both online and offline tactics, and also the content and assets required to support each tactic. So now let's think about how do we create the a brand, and a strong brand boosts marketing efficiency, and it also enhances your credibility in the market. Again, this requires consistent, authentic execution across every touch point with your customer and the market. And when you start building that team, that your team needs to be committed to your vision, your mission, your values. They need to understand your strategy and be able to execute the heck out of it. So your branding team needs to translate all of your strategy into universal visuals and succinct language that embodies the team. So you need to find people who can move comfortably between verbal and nonverbal communication, that understands the visual cues that you're giving your audience and can match that with the right tone in the language that you use with the market. Again, they need to be able to ensure consistency across every contact with the outside world. And this requires a lot of cross-functional coordination with product, with other marketing functions, and their patience has to be endless. They're going to be working with a bunch of teams that have sometimes obtuse or finicky demands, from logo to color story to websites to decks to campaigns, digital assets, and more. So they have to be patient. They have to be open for input, constructive input, and they have to be able to push back when they're not getting that, and really solicit feedback. And so one of the things whenever I talk to founders and folks who are scaling is building a brand takes time. It's not a one-time exercise. Brands evolve, sometimes incrementally, and sometimes more comprehensively. And it really depends on how your audiences are reacting to your brand, and how the competition is reacting to it. So don't paint yourself in a corner. You also have to remember that emotion drives decisions. Regardless of your B2B or B2C, the most rational decision makers are driven by emotion, whether they know it or not. So your team needs to be able to jockey from the macro to the micro to create emotional connections with your audience. So for example, from a macro point of view, we want to support organizations that share our values. And from the micro point of view, we're looking for specific benefits and specs to meet our needs. So you have to be able to answer both of those micro and macro needs in a very short period of time. So you need to use visual clues, succinct language to quickly share why they want to create that connection for you, draw them into you. So again, consistency is key. You need time to establish your brand. The longer you're around, the more consistently that you are around, the stronger your brand is. So for example, Doritos just had an ad without the Doritos brand, but the brand is so strong, you knew what that triangle meant. And so eventually, whenever you build your brand and your team is consistently executing across all channels, you'll be able to make those visual clues and implant them into your audience. So now let's move over to creating an air cover, which is really a force multiplier for demand generation, and that's public relations. So while it's helpful, good PR requires much more than strong relationships with the press. So as you build your team, their Rolodex should not be your primary concern and your driving force behind finding people to work with you. There need to have three major skills. One, they have to be able to understand and tell your unique story. They have to understand why your company is going to succeed. And that's really a combination of your leadership team, your values, and your solution. And two, they also have to be able to forecast industry trends and understand the competitive landscape. To get traction, they have to use those two things to help them highlight why your special sauce, your differentiating features and benefits is so important to the market. And lastly, you have to remember that this is a sales process. Great stories don't sell themselves. Your PR team needs to be tenacious. They need to push your agenda while at the same time helping your influencer audiences achieve their goals. So that means they have to be able to customize your story, tie it to what their audience, which is editors, reporters, analysts, care about, and injecting them with how you fit into the industry at large, how you're changing the industry, how you're really pushing the envelope, how you fit into trending news and what you're doing to help make the world a better place. And, you know, where do you fit in with what they're currently working on their editorial calendars? You need to slip in there. And so one of the things, missteps that I see small companies do is focusing on press releases. Press releases are great for SEO purposes, but they're not effective on their own. They're only really effective for companies that already have a following. So use your press releases if you have news on your product or shifting your business, or you have a new customer, but build that around a campaign that goes well beyond PR. Next is avoid misleading statements. That is a huge misstep, that if you make claims that you can't back up, you may get a win short term, but long term, its credibility is easily lost. So while you will always want to put a positive spin on what your company's doing, it's important to be truthful and back up your claims. And then the last piece around PR is really think about PR as a journey. It's not an on-off switch. It usually takes 2 to 3 months before you're going to get your first story. And usually you're going to start off with a small or targeted publication, and then you're going to build your following. And as you build your following, you build credibility. And with time and the right stories, you're going to move on to more prestigious brands like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, as time goes on. And so lastly is the area that most founders ask about is, how do I get more customers faster? And that's demand generation. Here, you're going to build on your competitive strategy, which is, again, it's based on an honest assessment of your company, your product, your service, what your differentiators are, how you stack up against the competition, and who are the people that you're trying to convert and bring into the fold. And demand generation should act essentially like a helping hand. Once you have the strategy in place, you're going to prioritize integrated set of tactics that will guide your audience through the buyer's journey and into your arms. So when you're building a team, you need to not only think about creative, but you also need to think about analytical. You know, this is where left and right brain work hand in hand. You're going to need to find people that are analytical with a testing mindset. Because again, people are not as rational as we'd like to believe. That's why there's fields of studies that have emerged to explain and predict human behavior, everything from behavioral economics to neuropsychology. So you need people who can form hypotheses and set up test scenarios and translate test results into actionable recommendations so you can constantly improve and pivot when you need to. They also have to be results oriented. They have to be comfortable with having targets, hitting targets, and focus not on what should work or how things should proceed. They need to focus on what does work, double down on what works, and pivot away from what doesn't. You have to be able to own something and then let it go just as easily. And then the last piece, again, is cross-functional leadership. People in demand generation need to understand how to interface with their partners in finance, for budget, operations, for dev, understanding the quantity, understanding what our costs are. They need to understand where sales are so they can help sales push it to the last line. they also need to be able to interface with the creative teams and get their resources that they need to achieve their goals. Ultimately, you need demand generation needs buy-in from all of their partners, and they need their support to be able to successfully implement their programs. And so whenever you think about demand generation and you build that team, it's all about efficacy and ROI. One of the issues that you may run into is that, you're trying to make things look pretty, and looks aren't everything, just like in dating. You have to ensure that you're presenting the same face to your customers across all your channels. Each tactic needs to reinforce your major brand tenets, and you have to reuse content across all channels. So what you might find in some cases is each silo within demand generation is optimizing for their results. For example, in your e-commerce silo, you might have red buttons work the best. In your email, purple buttons might work the best. And in social media, blue buttons might work the best. While each channel needs to optimize for their own results, they also have to conform to the brand. So there needs to be a dance between optimizing results for each channel and optimizing the results for the overall company. And it's a fine dance. And we'll talk about monitoring performance later. You also have to keep it simple and honest. Again, credibility is really hard to build, but it's very easily lost. So while you might want to use flowery language or industry speak, don't. It's not effective. It's essentially fluff. And if you exaggerate, you may get a customer or two from that exaggeration, but people, whenever they share their feedback and with word of mouth, they're most likely to share a complaint than praise a product. So just be very wary of that. And then the last piece is set up your KPIs. Not only set them up, but figure out how to measure them and implement that measurement. There's so many times that I work with companies where they talk about what they should do, what they would do, and talk about, why isn't this working? We're doing everything right. Well, you have to figure out what works. And many times what you think should work or what has worked in the past changes. So you need to constantly monitor your performance. So, avoid your gut. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask a question. I think, Olivia, if you want to put the question. So, where are you currently allocating the majority of your resources? Is it in product, brand, public relations, or demand generation? Interesting. Awesome. So most of you are focusing on getting the product where it needs to be, which is great. So let's move on. We're going to talk about how you should allocate your resources, both human and financial, because time is as valuable as budget, and how you allocate that across your marketing mix as your company matures and scales. And we're going to talk about it in terms of funding stages, because that's usually a easy way to talk about what level of growth you're at. And then after that, we're going to touch on a case study, talk about how the theory can practically be applied. So whenever I talk about marketing maturity, I always reference Gartner's maturity model. Your marketing department should be measured by the profit it delivers to a brand, right? And so as a company graduates to higher and higher levels of marketing maturity, you're going to increase cross-functional communication. You're going to increase the efficiency in which you deliver revenue. And your goal is to make a marketing department that's a strategic partner at the highest levels of marketing maturity, to embed them in every function of the company. Because in the end, marketing is the mouthpiece of your company. It's how your customers understand what's happening with the company. It's how the market understands how the company is growing and solving problems and making the world a better place. Without marketing, it's a secret. So marketing needs to understand everything that's going on in the company so they can brag about it and defend it. And so I like to think about it like a symphony, where individual components blend together seamlessly. It's beautiful and powerful. But because you don't have the same level of resources as an Amazon or an Apple, focus and efficacy are going to be important. Because when you put too much on your team's plate, your team is going to do everything okay. And just do the checklist, get things off their plate, work on the next thing, get it out there. There's going to be a lot of mistakes, a lot of mediocre results. And instead, you need to focus on what your team can do well and execute, not to perfection, as close to perfection as possible. So you need to focus on the tactics that are based on the intersection of your customer, your team skill set, and that's your internal team and your external partners, and the budget. So you can really focus on what you can execute well, which in turn increases your ROI, which will in turn increase your budget. And so that requires seamless integration across your entire marketing mix. Your campaigns need to be integrated across channels, across teams. You need to cross-pollinate your content so you can attract your prospects. You can get them to consider you, you entice them to choose you, and then you get them to advocate for you. And so getting the right message to the right people at the right time is almost impossible. It's not easy, which is why you need to monitor your performance across not only channels, but across the entire marketing funnel so that you know what you're doing works. And the ultimate KPI for marketing is revenue. Marketing teams need to focus on outcomes rather than output. It doesn't matter how many campaigns you have going out there. If you have email campaigns, social media campaigns, TV, paid search, if they're not working in tandem and they're not generating results, then you're wasting your time. So as we start thinking about the funnel and performance, first we need to think about awareness. And, when you're building awareness, you need to understand how effectively are you attracting people to your company, your product, as they're exploring their options? Are you providing them information that is relevant to them in a way that it encourages them to share and to read, to use, which is the most important piece? Once you move into the consideration phase, you need to make sure that when your prospects are exploring their option, that you are helping them simplify their decision-making process, which is obviously working with you, right? You need to help them understand why what you do is important to them. And when it's time for them to make decisions, you need to deliver relevant, inspiring content that promotes a decision process. It helps them make that buy decision. It helps them buy more from you or buy different things from you. So for example, if you think about Casper, not only can you buy a bed, you can buy sheets, you can buy pillows. There's lots of ways that you can, that Casper works with people at their buying decision to help them make better decisions. And then lastly, once they are a customer, how are you helping them advocate for you? Are you rewarding them? Are you making it easier for them to share their positive experiences with you? And once you are able to answer those questions, you'll be able to create a revenue circle. And essentially, your customers will then engage with the people who've never heard of you, move them down the funnel, and it's a cycle that repeats itself over and over and over again. And eventually, you get a mass of people that know who you are, like what you do, and buy from you. So let's talk about how we allocate. And one of the things I want to be very transparent about, these are generic recommendations based on B2B and B2C. Each company is different. Each company has a different set of different team members, different targets, and different differentiating features. So use this as a guide as you start thinking about your own company. So for the seed angel stage, your goal is really establishing product market fit. So it would make sense if you're in your seed and angel stage that you're focusing on product and you're investing in product. But not only are you investing in product, you're also investing in creating a repeatable customer acquisition process, because that will get you to your next level of funding. So here you're going to really be building your foundational understanding of customers and the competition. As you build your customer base, you're going to interview or survey your customers. You can also use your hiring process as a way to get information about your competition and your customers that they're customer facing. What's important during this phase is to really define and reinforce your vision, your mission, your values. And that's because that is what will be guiding you, your team, your internal, external partners, your brand. And, you know, if you handle it in a rote or obligatory manner, you're going to find yourself on a haphazard path, which I've seen plenty of times. So invest in that. That's your time. That doesn't necessarily cost money, but it requires your attention and your time. And since you don't have a track record, you're going to want to really reinforce your presence. Here, design, logo, brand is your first indication of how credible you are and the quality of product or service that you offer. So do invest in those basic brand essentials, your logo, your color palette, your high-level messaging. You don't need to get a big branding agency. You just need to get a very professional look and feel. So invest in it. You don't have to spend all your time on it. Just make sure that you're buttoned up whenever you go into the market. And the last thing to do is start testing your way into success. So when you first start, you're going to have a hypothesis. Build tests around that to test your hypotheses. And if it's not proving as you had initially thought, pivot and build tests around the pivot. So really be open to change, be open to pivoting, but at the same time, stay true to yourself and stay true to your values. It's going to be very important. And as you grow and you're ready to fund your next level of growth, we're talking about Bridge and Series A here because Bridge can be across any of the categories that we talk about. It can be between A and B, B and C, C plus, or it can be an alternative for going to a VC. For simplicity, we're going to talk about it here. Either way, you have to prepare for the next phase of growth. And this is where you're going to start really investing in that repeatable acquisition cycle that you've created in your seed phase. This is the time that proves that your business model will work. And so as you're hiring, you're going to invest heavily in PR. You need to get the word out. Not only, depending on B2B, B2C, you know, the tactics will be different, but people need to know who you are. And that is a really quick way to build credibility. Here, you need to start building good habits, start embedding your marketing team with your functional partners, have your marketing team, whether it's one person or 20, show the wins, show the challenges, and what they're working on, because everybody's going to want a little piece of marketing. You also need to have them document what they do, document their processes, document their plans, because what they're working on, your other teams are going to want to know about. Your other teams may have really good information that would help them avoid roadblocks. So, you know, even though you're documenting processes and plans, you have to be flexible. You have to find areas that are perfect for automation, even if you don't have the tools or the skill set to automate it. Make sure that you've identified it, that you've created the process, because that's how you best use technology, is when you know what you're automating. And establish calendars. Let people know what you're doing. What is email doing, social media? How many times is social media promoting your latest feature or a promotion, a discounted promotion, a free trial? Make sure that everybody knows what you're doing, and the people within your company can help amplify your voice. Also, during this time, it's time to start thinking about what your MarTech stack is going to look like, because you need to capture data, you need to measure performance. Not only that, you need to start automating things. So, you know, ensure that you're starting to build your MarTech stack, you're starting to track performance, and that you're using the data. There's so many times that, you know, I work with companies who have all kinds of data, you know, 5 different tools, but they don't use the data and they can't tell me if a campaign's been working. So make sure that you're using the data, and you can use the data to augment your personas. You can get behavioral insights from web analytics, from predictive models, from product uses. So data can be really informative for you as long as you use it. And lastly, continue building on your brand. So now your brand is going to start getting more formal. You're going to update your messaging hierarchy based on what you've learned about your customer and the competition. You're most likely going to want to tweak your logo, maybe your color palette, probably your tone and voice, and you're going to need to document that and brand guidelines and build collateral. So everybody will have notepads with your brand, pens with your brand. This is the time when you start getting people, if they're not already excited, you need to get them excited and bought into your brand. And so the metrics that you look at are going to be more channel, more granular. You're going to be looking at coverage. You're going to be looking at reviews and awards because you're really focused on building that credibility. And so now as we move to Series B and beyond, we're really establishing market viability. We're penetrating the market. We're proving that we're a sustainable business, and we're proving that we're going to grow. And here's where you start pivoting your team from generalists to bringing in more specialists. And this is going to be a very interesting time in terms of culture. There's going to be a change in the kind of people that you're bringing in, and people are going to be more focused on their skills. And that has two symptoms, or I guess outcomes. One is you're going to have to really focus on defining roles, defining cross-functional responsibilities, and defining how teams will work together, and making sure that each team has accountability against metrics. And two, you're going to have to make sure that they don't focus on silos. So a lot of times your employees that grew up with you, that they brought you to that place, they're going to want to continue wearing different hats. And some may be able to, others may have to focus on an area of specialization. So you have to be aware of that. Here is where you start building on your MarTech stack. Here you might be moving to, let's say from a Toyota to a Cadillac. You're going to be getting more expensive, deeper technology, more complicated technology that will require you have administrators with specialized skills. You're going to start integrating your campaigns in these tools, and these tools are going to start working and speaking to each other. So you're going to have a holistic view of ROI, and hopefully you're going to be able to build a multi-attribution or multi-touch attribution. So you will understand, for example, one of the combinations of marketing tactics that you wouldn't expect to be the most effective tactics are TV commercials with paid search. That actually has the highest ROI together when you use them together. You wouldn't know that if you don't have the data and the multi-touch attribution models built. You're also going to start digging deeper into your customer psychographic and behavioral characteristics. So, at the beginning, you'll probably be more demographic focused on the basics of your customer attributes. But as you start getting larger, as you start getting more tools and more access to data and more data, you're going to start being able to understand your customer on a deeper and deeper level. So, once you feed those in, you're going to constantly be updating your personas because preferences change, and you need to change with them. And so lastly is the goal of most startups is, exit, whether it's IPO or acquisition. And this is where your company is really going to get their P&L in shape to attract investors. This means that you need to show that you're positioned to continue to expand your company and that you're going to be able to continue to grow your customer base. And in this phase, it's all about optimization, optimize, optimize, optimize. You're adding more tactics. You're expanding the ones that work. You're fine-tuning your operations. And this is where management and operational know-how is really important. So before we move into a case study, I want to check your pulse again. So now that we've gone through some examples of how your marketing mix would change as you grow, where are you going to be allocating the majority of your resources again? Awesome. So it seems like there's been a little bit of a adjustment. So let me go over a quick case study. This is a case study of a young company. It's a bootstrap company. They were looking to raise Series A funding because they felt like they were ready to scale. They built a marketplace that connected hourly workforce to employers. So it's a matchmaking solution. They were generating very healthy revenue. They had beta participants with high employee turnover. And so they were able to get these beta participants through their relationships, the founders' relationships. So before they went in to ask for funding, they wanted to ensure that they had that revenue generation engine, that they had the process that they could then, once they got funding, feed the process and generate revenue. So in this situation, we focus on two things, one being product and the other being marketing. We fine-tuned some key features based on feedback from their beta participants. We also updated the positioning and made sure that we were very clear in the benefits that we were providing them, and that we spoke about the benefits in language that they understood. So it goes back into branding and the voice and the tone. We also optimized the conversion funnel and started testing different demand generation tactics. So, one of the things that we really focused on is ensuring that the branding from the conversion funnel matched the branding for the demand generation. And we essentially had two different customers and two sets of messages, one for employers and one for workers. And so we had to make sure that the branding was consistent, not only for each target, but consistent along all targets. So employers and workers saw the same tone, the same brand, one face to the customer, right? And so we started testing and optimizing, testing the messaging, fine-tuning the messaging. We even tested the logo. And from that, we were able to do two things. One, we were able to get the acquisition cost. Two, we were able to fine-tune the messaging. So not only did we know how much we needed to spend to acquire a customer, we also knew how to speak to them to be able to optimize our marketing budget and spend less. And so we started building that funnel. We focused on a couple of things, email, social media, phone sales, and and started setting pricing. So one of the things, whenever you're in beta, pricing is a bit of a question, and you're having to figure out, where do we really land? Where do we land against the competition? And we really focus not only on the competition, but we also focus on their cost structure, right? Because as they scale, and as you scale, your cost structure is going to be very important, and you want to make sure that you're building fences around the areas of your product or service that where cost is going to be incremental. So you need to build safeguards around that. And so we set initial pricing. We started building the funnel. We had not only the beta participants, but we had phase 1 of our launch, our soft launch, ready to go for our fundraise. And we shopped around to 10 VCs. The founders were narrowed down to 2 VCs who wanted to make substantial investments. And instead they chose financing. So they chose the bridge financing because they wanted to keep their ownership of the company, and they wanted to avoid dilution. It's been 3 years now, and they've grown substantially. They've also rebranded, and they are considering another round, but we'll see if they need it. So thank you guys. I know, I hope I answered your questions. I hope that you can come away with some new ways of thinking about your marketing mix, thinking about how you're going to scale, thinking about the kinds of people you're going to need to help you scale. Any questions that you have while we're here?
Christine, thank you so much. So we do have a few questions. Let's see.
Okay.
Let's see, 1 second. So we have one question. Hi, Christine. How and where can or should we use marketing to avoid churn?
Oh, yeah, you should be using marketing to avoid churn. How and it depends on your product, your service. You should use marketing to, well, again, do we know what the service is?
It was not specified, but we can ask for, let's see, we can ask for this person, Andres. Let us know. You can type in some details, maybe while Christine gives us a general answer, and then once we know a little bit more, she can get more specific.
So generically, after you've converted them to a customer, that is the first step of your relationship with them, right? So with time, you need to be sharing with them all the benefits. You need to reinforce all the benefits that you're giving them, especially if it's a subscription service. And you need to use that time to get feedback from them, right? So, it's not just talking to them, it's getting feedback from them. You can also, hopefully you're creating referral engines, referral programs, so that you're having a dialogue with your customers. So you should know long before they leave that they're considering leaving, right? And there's lots of ways that you can pick up on it, whether they're not replying to you, or they're giving you bad feedback, or they're asking for help with your product. So there's lots of ways that you can suss it out. But what I always tell people is, after you've got the customer, that is the strongest marketing tool you have, is that person who has interfaced with your company, bought your product, likes your product, hopefully. So, marketing dollars using from referrals is actually a quarter of what it takes to get a new customer. So think about customers as an investment, and whatever they're worth to you in terms of revenue, they're worth a quarter of that in terms of marketing. So you need to use that. Otherwise, it's just going to waste.
Very good advice. Thank you, Christine. I think we have time for one more question. We have so many. So for those of you who have sent some questions to us, we'll make sure that in the resources follow-up email, we have enough, we have answers to these questions there. And while we are finishing up Q&A, while you're listening, if you wouldn't mind filling out a survey, Christine would love to know whether you liked this training, and NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center would love to know as well. Olivia has put that in the chat, and please just take a few minutes to fill that out to let us know. Okay, so I think this will be our last question for today. Christine, what are some excellent combinations of tactics that have the highest lead generation rates based on the data that you've seen for both B2B and B2C?
Again, it depends on the customer. It depends on the product, where your customer plays. Again, one of the strongest B2C plays I've seen is as paid TV ads with paid search. When you use them in tandem, the ROI is incredibly high, especially if you have an e-commerce company. But, there's no secret sauce. There's not, if you do A, then B will happen, then C will happen. It's all different. And one of the things that can be frustrating or exciting about marketing is performance always changes over time. So something that works really well this year, in 3 years, probably isn't going to be very effective. And that's because everybody else is doing it, and the market and your audience are just tuned out. They just stop being effective. You could say the same for digital advertising, email. Email used to be amazing. Still is. It's still good. But the effectiveness has declined over time just because everybody does it. That's why there's spam filters now.
Thank you, Christine. Again, words of wisdom. So I think we need to wrap up. We will have some other questions answered in the resource email follow-up, as well as the recording links. So for all of you that are here that would like to rewatch this, because this was chock full of some amazing expertise from Christine, you will receive that. We had a lot of questions about that. Christine, any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share before we wrap up today? If you're hiring and you're building a team, one of my biggest pieces of advice, if you don't have a marketing background, bring somebody in bring a friend who has a marketing background and ask them to help you weed people out. I think that's going to be the most important piece for you. Get help from experts. Make sure that you measure the results that they bring, because marketing's there to make money. We're not necessarily there. I mean, we're there to make you look good, but we're there to make you look good so you can make money. So in the end, make sure that that is the North Star for your marketing team. Christine, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to our community, to share your insights, and to set such a great overview. On behalf of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center and everyone in attendance today, we are sincerely We're sincerely in grace and thanks for joining us. And we would, again, love to hear from you. So everyone still in attendance, please fill out the survey that is in the chat function, and look forward to next Tuesday, Funding Optionality with Bank of the West and 1863 Ventures, as well as Thursday, the revolutionary way to create shared value. We would love to have you. We hope everyone enjoys their day, morning or afternoon, and we hope to see you again at future trainings. Thank you all.